Okay, excellent. So we are in Aries, and we know that Aries expresses rays 1 and 7 primarily, but Aries also has an intimate link with Mercury, which is the divine intermediary. So it's a wonderful combination to take the highest and express it through the lowest, through that quality of intuition or Buddhai. Okay, so we will go to the next slide, which is just sort of a little outline here. I'm going to divert my usual program to sort of address some of the stuff that's going on in the world at this time. And these questions are discussed by so many people at this time. But the esotericist often has a different view of world events and why things are happening. And always reaffirming why we study these teachings of the masters in the ageless wisdom and their accompanied techniques and meditative practices that can lead to greater world service and inner freedom, which is so much needed at this time. And then, of course, why the teachings on the divine will precipitated from Shambhala and the will of the planetary logos are important. We're going to divert slightly as we begin this presentation, but we're going to go back and finish off the outline that I made last month on the divine will. We really only sort of got halfway through it, but there was so many wonderful comments and insights that all of you shared. It was important that we address them and honor them. So thank you. Okay, now before we move into the will aspect and how it may be affecting historical events at this time, I wanted to share a few comments by Alice Bailey on the concept of the Antichrist. And it's important because the idea of the Antichrist in contemporary terms or in normal everyday Christian circles is entirely different than the occult interpretation of the Antichrist. And we're going to explore that difference. So, would somebody like to read this first quote by Alice Bailey on the Antichrist?
I can help.
Well, thank you.
The Antichrist. A great deal of the destructive energy extant in the world today is due to the presence on the astral plane of a first-rate disciple of the planetary logos. His work it is to clear the way for the manifestation of these other four major disciples, who are primarily builders. They will enter on their work when the task of the records of form has been accomplished. 1936. I should like, should I go on?
Yes, okay. Please continue.
Okay. I should like here to give a suggestion, for it is necessary that some of the methods of the hierarchy should begin to be understood. The work of what in the West is called the Christ principle is to build the forms for the expression of quality and life. That it is the characteristic work of the second aspect of divinity, The work of the Antichrist is to destroy forms, and this is essentially the work of the first expression of divinity. But the work of the destroyer is not the work of black magic, and when ignorant humanity regards Antichrist as working on the black side, their error is great. His work is as beneficent as that of the building aspect, and it is but man's hatred of the death of forms which makes him regard the work of the destroyer as black, as being against the divine will, and as subversive of the divine program. The work of the representatives of that mysterious power, which we call cosmic evil, and the responding representatives, is indeed worthy of the word black, but it is not applicable to the work of Antichrist. It might be added that the work of the black forces wells up from below, whilst the work of the destroyers is impelled from above. EP 175, 76, 1936.
Excellent, thank you. The first part of the quote is important to understand that this was written in 1936, and there may be a number of first-ray disciples or initiates working in the background to bring the old civilization down through destruction and make way for the new dispensation of the second ray, the seventh ray, to rebuild and to create an edifice that reflects clearly the hierarchy and the soul on their higher levels. And then the second part of this quote goes into the idea that we need to distinguish between the esoteric Antichrist and the Black Lodge, because they are distinctly different. And it's not unusual to stereotype first-rate people as being not nice or even evil, because they're knocking down all kinds of structures that the second ray types often are very familiar with, and find that it goes against their type of energy, not esoterically, but on a personality level. Without the destruction of form, cyclically, there cannot be the new emergence, the new incarnation of advanced souls. So I wanted to establish that difference, because we know in the Christian conventional Orthodox tradition, the Antichrist is somebody who opposes the Christ, whereas the esoteric Antichrist is there to assist the Christ. Okay. Looking at current events, I have just recently learned to use AI Grok. And I asked AI Grok to summarize all that Alice Bailey said in all of her books on the concept of glamour. And boy, it was very, very extended and quite extensive, everything that she wrote, and then have it summarized by Grok. I then took this summary and asked Grok to give me an example of this idea of glamour, because that's what I asked Grok to do, to summarize everything on glamour, and asked Grok to give me an example of this idea of glamour exhibited by some famous world figures, such as President Donald Trump. And this same question could also be done to President Biden or many other world figures. I wasn't trying to make some major political statements here. I was just curious. If I took everything that Alice Bailey said on glamour and compared it to the leader of the so-called free world and the most powerful country on the planet, what would Glamour say? Now, this is Grok's response. Would somebody else like to read this? Rose, are you there?
I'll
Hey,
read.
Duane, it's Francis. Well, go ahead, Joe.
Okay, Francis, please. Thank you.
Glamour, a world problem. Donald Trump exhibits glamour for the following reasons. Hold on one second. Let me just.
You take your time.
His whole life revolves around luxury branding, slapping Trump on towers, golf courses, hotels, like they're magic keys to success and admiration. He doesn't just own property, he sells the dream of it, the shiny gold-plated illusion of being the best. Think Mar-a-Lago, endless chandeliers, marble crowds in tuxes, all screaming, "I've arrived." It's not cold logic, that's illusion, or raw habit, Maya. Excuse me. It's emotional pull, fear of looking ordinary, craving applause. Even politics. He turns rallies into spectacle, feeding followers' desires for winning, while the fog hides real costs, like division or policy flops. Look at these shots. That ballroom dripping in gold, imposing amid opulence. It's glamour incarnate, desire distorting reality, making wealth and ego feel like truth. Bailey says soul light would burn that off by showing how empty it is. But for now, he's deep in the mist. An additional comment by Alice Bailey on glamour that may be germane to this inquiry or conversation. First-ray people belong to what is called the destroyer ray, and the power of the first aspect, which is the power to bring to an end, flows through them. They will have a tendency to destroy as they build through a wrong direction of energy, through overemphasis of energy in some particular direction, or through misuse of energy in work with themselves or others. Many first-rate people have the tendency to pride themselves on this and hide behind a plea that, being upon the first ray, a destructive tendency is unavoidable. Such is not the case. Builders, such as second-rate people always are, have to learn to destroy when prompted by group love and acting under the will of first-ray aspect or first-ray aspect. Destroyers have to learn to build, acting ever under the impulse of group love and utilizing the power of attachment in a detached manner. Both groups, builders and destroyers, must ever work from the standpoint of reality, from the inner nucleus of truth, and must take their stand at the center.
Excellent, Francis.
Made me
Thank
think
you.
of one thing. Didn't DK say that when the form is teared down, do you not save that part of the foundation which works and then build upon that, if I remember? Something to
That
that.
sounds correct.
Yeah.
So I think that, first of all, we have an analysis by AI Grok. And I posted this on Facebook because I was really very blown away. And there were hundreds of people that indicated that they were in agreement with Grok's assessment. And there were a couple of dissenting people who sort of indicated, well, I must have somehow personally put some of my own prejudice or ideas into this inquiry. But I've never written anything publicly on Donald Trump, and I have no doubt that Donald Trump has some redeeming qualities. And yes, maybe I should additionally apply this to other world leaders. But I found it very, very powerful. And AI, which is artificial intelligence, is going to be pretty impersonal. I mean, think about it. You take all of Alice Bailey's comments on glamour and you apply it to a person. You don't say, oh, I don't like this person, therefore give me an idea of everything bad about him. You just take Alice Bailey's ideas of glamour and you apply it to a person, and this is what comes out. So I apologize if this sort of sees or feels like it's something personal. It's actually it's out of a computer. Anyway, Donald Trump may not be the Antichrist, esoterically speaking, as we have demonstrated here, but his values appear largely to be anti-Christian. I am reminded of a comment made by a fellow disciple of the Ageless Wisdom who pointed out that the Christian golden rule is, and I quote, "Do unto others as you would have them do unto you," unquote. The golden rule for a certain class of people who are now politically running our country is, and I quote, "Those who have the most gold rule." Think about those two contrasts. Doing unto others as you would have them do unto you versus those who have the most gold rule. And I'm sure there's many exceptions, but boy, when I look out over the world situation and the condition, I see a lot of those who have the most gold, financial stability, taking advantage of their positions of power and influencing all kinds of people and groups negatively. Now, to go back to President Donald Trump, in a way, he's created a revolution. And the question is it a revolution that's good, or is it a revolution that's limiting and restricting? And I see a lot of first ray around this man, but I also see a lot of sixth ray, a lot of third ray. And I think through this revolution that he has created may not be all that positive on the surface, but it may be a question of we have to define as esotericists not exactly what it is that we want. That's a given. That's obvious. But we have to outline what it is that we don't want. And I think the president and other world leaders, not just Trump, have demonstrated clearly there are things about them or about their policies we do not want. So there has been this emergence of new and more advanced disciples, not just like on the Democratic side, but also on the Republican side, also independents who have emerged that hold greater spiritual values. Now, you may not hear about them, you may not even see them, but if you're into alternative news, you will see that this dark cloud that has been formed over the planet during this time historically holds greater promise of this emergence of spiritual values. It's a very interesting situation. And let's see how I can put this correctly. A lot of the suffering and destruction that's going on has always existed. This idea of pedophilia and misconduct sexually is not something that has just emerged because it's something new. It has existed for a long time, but it has not been addressed. And what is happening now, historically, which is good, is that it's being brought to the surface so that many people can view these long-standing problems. And we might actually call it a part of the dweller on the threshold of the planet. It's not just a group here, not just a group there. It's humanity at large that needs to face their dweller on the threshold on a macrocosmic level and a microcosmic level. So all the craziness, all the strife, all the destruction is bringing up what it is that we don't want, and it's galvanizing good people, often like ourselves, to take more responsibility, to intercede, and to spread our light more dynamically into the groups with which we work and through the planetary grid as it now exists. Sometimes disciples, because of little issues they're working out as they pass down the path of initiation, they don't give themselves enough credit. They're often very humble and very, especially second-rate people, very reticent to think, oh, I can affect these world conditions. No, I'm still struggling with my own little personal issues. Yes, however, your thoughts, your meditations, your invocations are having effect on the planetary life. And we have to always keep that as not simply an ideal, which is important, but as a reality. Keep that pressure on darkness by our goodness. So I sort of apologize for taking the group in a diverse offshoot of where I normally go. But what I'd like to do right now is to open the group up and get any feedback, any additional comments. And this is important because we are on the front lines of this work of emerging the destroyer, the Antichrist esoterically, and trying to get control over evil in the Black Lodge. So it's open if anybody wants to make a comment.
So, Greg, you put your hand up, and then I got my hand up. So, Greg, go ahead.
Yeah, it was an interesting experiment that you chose to bring forth here, Duane, with regards to this AI robotic interpretation of how Donald Trump exhibits glamour. Now, I'm not saying that it's a good thing or a bad thing, and we have to use the AI accordingly. But what I found is there are actually several people who, using the science of esoteric psychology, have evaluated the how some of the aspects of Donald Trump, and that's very open. Like our friend from who wrote the book out of I think New Zealand, who wrote a lot about esoteric psychology. she did a lot of she did a little bit of writing and interpretation using the sciences of esoteric psychology and esoteric astrology to explore what some of the aspects of Donald Trump. I myself have did a third year paper, I mean a fourth year service and solutions paper directly focused on some of the interpretations that we can grok on our own without the use of a robotic um, uh, situation about Donald Trump that carries value, because if you follow the logic and the science accordingly, you can begin to see the value of it in your own right. But what it really comes down to, each one of us has to make that decision. Each one of us has to explore the interpretive aspects for ourselves so that we can begin to see those aspects of Trump in terms of anti-Trump, but not, I mean, anti-Christ, but not in terms of as the way Alice Bailey describes Antichrist. But anyway, this is a very good experiment for us to reveal and to explore with regards to some of the possibilities. And yes, he really does, in my opinion, represent a big, huge collective dweller on the threshold, and so does Putin, and so does Viktor Orban. They're all really strong, powerful examples of the global dweller that we all have to work out through for ourselves. But we first do that within ourselves.
Excellent, Greg. I couldn't agree with you more, and I appreciate the thought and the research that you have done. And it does always come back to ourselves and how much time we want to spend to understand these issues. Okay, great. Thank you. Michael, you're on.
So the first thing I wanted to kind of bring up is a concept I understand about the use of magic and the idea that when you're kind of like always invoking a certain individual, you're actually empowering them. So there's a concerted effort because he's like the front of an entire orchestra right now. And there's like this continuation of constantly invoking this person's name over and over and over again, which if the goal is, if anybody's goal is to actually disempower um the energy that they're doing, you would, as you would do with fear, you turn your back on them. Like in a Buddhist ashram, if someone does something, you don't yell at them, you turn your back on them and walk away from them, and then they have to sit in the ashram like in silence, alone, kind of just dealing with their own internal issues. But that's just that aspect of it. Um, the other part, I guess this is potentially like I'll just deal with the AI part and then another part after that. When you're looking at I think that every single person in here could read that AI. This is why AI is, yeah, you can have it kind of compile all of this information, but everyone in here will probably read that AI from their own projections and their own perceptions. So although it may be conveyed impersonally, it will be interpreted and ingested personally based on whatever your perspective is. That's why, it's great AI can pull up all of this information and everything, but we're still going back to dealing with our own personal processes and not allowing something external to process for us. At least I think that's what our path is, as evolving humanity. And then, like a lot of what we're dealing with right now is like, as far as I've observed, and this goes to our group, and this goes to spiritual groups, and this goes to us in general. We started, in the first iteration, which was 2016, where this individual was elected, and they normalized hatred towards him. And so that normalization of hatred towards him, of course, if you had a child that was a narcissist or had psychopathic tendencies, and you punish them, and you push hate at them, they're more likely to come out even with more disturbing personality traits, as well as amplified narcissism and psychopathic tendencies. And so that was where, in my observation, from a broader perspective, we had the opportunity to look at the entire political corruption, the cesspool that is all politics in general. For me, I've been following politics for a long time, so I go all the way back to Clinton, and it's still a cesspool even in the 90s. It's a cesspool what they're doing. It's massive corruption. It's just been more corrupt. Now it's just like blatant, because as citizens, and again, the idea that we're supposed to internalize the war and keep the war on the inner plane. Well, that was the first test, 2016. Are we going to keep the war on the inner plane and address our own inaction politically, our own inability to keep like the 1960s civil rights stuff and the peace movements alive into the 90s? Are we going to deal with the fact that we dropped the ball completely and allowed all of these entities and individuals and corporations to take over? That we've allowed, media to put certain images forward for us to consume and look at as idols, and just twist our brains. But then after Trump, we had another iteration of a test, and that was the whole health crisis, which brought into question bodily autonomy, free will, and the same type of hatred and lack of unity and lack of love was then transferred into that test, and we failed. And so there was all of these like divisions, and something that I would like, as an old school civil rights person from the 60s, would never support the lack of bodily autonomy or free will of what you wanted to put in your body, and they made it into the two tribal sides, which was intentional to divide people, put people on separate sides. Now, in both of those situations, those are the first two tests. I'm wondering, since we are in the esoteric sense, looking at what's underneath, because definition of esoteric is to look at what is beneath, what is the secret, what caused this. How many people studied like the real root causes of these issues, or even studying the root causes of the issues that we have today? So then we go into the third iteration test, Ukraine and Russia, and same thing again, total failure, because we had the ability to have peace. Many people probably don't even know, but there was a peace deal for that almost immediately before anyone died and before any land was annexed. And it just involved a security architecture, which Russia has been talking about since 2000. And since World War, the end of the World War, we just turned our hatred towards Russia and kind of programmed. The Cold War was just a programming of this concept. How many people then took the time to look underneath the hood, take an esoteric lens to these issues and say, what's going on beneath this? Like, what's the historical context here? What goes before 2020, 2022? What happened before that? What's the relationship of the Slavic people? How does Europe view the Slavic people? What's that, the whole bloodline thing? There's a lot of different issues beneath the surface there. And because that war was supported and continues to be supported, we then externalize darkness even more out into the physical plane. And then that led to the next iteration, which was a full-scale genocide. But my point here, I'm trying to say, is that that's on us in part. That's on us. So we can yell at Donald Trump and we can yell at all these people that are externalizing all of this shadow, but that's on us. We didn't speak up enough. We didn't stand up enough for different things. Um, you know, we didn't redirect the energy immediately. Like right when the political stuff happened, the spiritual groups, and I don't know what all the spiritual groups were doing, but I am saying that the spiritual groups should have immediately redirected that energy away from division, immediately created safe space for divinity and light to be protected and not contaminated and corrupted and inverted.
Okay, excellent. I really appreciate your insights, and you make many, many important points. If you have like a paper where you've put a lot of your thoughts down, I'd appreciate it because you could slip it into the chat and we could review it in its entirety. And you don't have to necessarily do it now, but maybe our next meeting, because you have a lot of research, a lot of important points that you've shared, and I really appreciate it. But I wanted
Yes.
to,
Yeah, I
I
don't want
want
to, I don't, okay, I'll like chill. So the last part about that, I've gone on a lot is just the idea that, um, on that first slide, again, the idea that the destroyer is an aspect of divinity is it's a truth on that higher level. And then as a group, again, talking about group dynamics, something to think about is how are we, because you have this thing where the destroyer has to come in and destroy and then you have to rebuild. But in the evolved state, if we make it or when we make it, we are consciously able to destroy. So we are consciously able to destroy group concretization and crystallization. And we're consciously able to shift authority within a group so that different people could be in leadership, and it shifts through a whole range of needs. And we don't lose the unity and cohesion, because one of the problems with this destruction that we're dealing with right now is that a lot of it, we've lost the unity and the cohesion. So we're going to have to rebuild. But when we're more evolved, we can consciously destroy the crystallization while maintaining our unity with one another.
Okay, excellent. Are there any additional comments anybody would like to make as we move forward here?
Rose.
Yes.
Go
Thank
ahead,
you.
Rose.
Yes.
Thank you,
Yes.
Michael.
I see also Francis Wilkinson in the chat said, I think Donald Trump has brought our collective shadow to the surface to be observed and become aware of. I think that comment ties in a lot with what Michael Crow was sharing. And I really did also appreciate some of the points you brought out, Michael, because it really got me thinking in this bigger, broader context and picture of you have to see this as a collective. These are not individual people or groups may represent certain aspects, but in the end, this is a collective aspect of humanity's dweller. Whichever aspect is being manifested in the world that we are saying this is not the light, this is not the direction we want to go. And there's this playing out on the drama field in humanity of these dweller aspects until the light, the collective soul has that light to direct these forces versus the elemental aspect of humanity directing these forces. And when we see it in that viewpoint, I think it really is beneficial for our group work, and it also depersonalizes a lot of it. Instead of saying that focal point there, that person or that group is the problem, when it's really a much bigger collective problem that goes back thousands and hundreds of thousands of years, as it's within the body of humanity itself. And um, from that point, oh, the ability in the esoteric work to see clearly, to see truth, is very beneficial for the collective. It's like the hundredth monkey effect, where if the clear thinkers of the world, whether you're esoteric or not, see deeply on the light of the soul illuminating the mind, and then the lower mind in penetrating deep through the glamours and through the propaganda, through the illusion that creates this miasma of distortion. That clarity of thought, whether it's individual or as a group or as a collective group, is extremely helpful in dispelling the glamours that distort the dweller of humanity's dweller into making the dark look like the light and vice versa. So I find on an earlier topic, I'm rambling to myself here, with the AI, what I had a comment on that was with the AI to, I find it, what I would find interesting about this AI, how it created this thing on Glamour. What would it say if we prompted it, okay, now tell us, and let's say we're going to use this political figure, or maybe we choose somebody else, or this movie actor or something. Now tell me the aspects of this political figure that are initiate qualities, and see what it says. So I think AI, again, in the last analysis, is a tool that can be used to maybe expand our own inquiry versus uh, any type of authority. Always that authority lies within our own discernment and discrimination. And if we can discern and see where it is getting its information, how it's collaborating it, it can be helpful. And it can also be, if we use our discernment, we can see where it has its own potential biases and its own training, if that's a proper word. So anyway, I think I've spoken enough, but those are just some thoughts. Thank you.
Excellent. Important insights, Rose. We appreciate that. And I think we're all in agreement that, to quote Carl Jung, before you can become integrated either as an individual or group, and can be applied to the whole planetary group of humanity, that you have to lift the unredeemed substance or the subconscious or whatever you want to call it to the surface to see its potency and to define it. If you can't define evil and its attributes, it's always this amorphous thing behind the scenes. But when you can bring it to the surface, and many people will say, oh, this is horrible. This didn't exist 20 years ago or 200. And maybe that's true. But maybe it has always existed, But now humanity has evolved, in spite of all of its limitations, to a place where it can deal with it in its totality. So thank you. Okay, any last comments here? Okay, Nisa, and that will be it. After Nisa, we'll move forward.
Well, first of all, the Epstein files, for me, were particularly revelatory as, more and more has come out. It really brought home to me how worldwide this this whole issue of not just human trafficking, pedophilia, but the other, the financial, insidious financial power that this individual had with his ability to find out secrets, to blackmail people, to create the swamp culture almost of our probably many nations, but it's pretty clear to me now that our own government has obviously been um, influenced by these things that were going on at a humongous worldwide level, that it never honestly ever occurred to me that it was this pervasive. And I just read an article not too long ago about, it was a therapy article, but they were talking about the nervous system of human beings basically gravitates to the familiar. And it's the person was talking about, that people will usually choose the familiar hell over the unfamiliar heaven, and that our brain's goal, the human brain goal, is survival primarily. It's not, to feel happier, it's to survive. And then what do we perceive as survival? And I think that those are kind of like, evidently they're like ground into us at a really deep level from millennial of incarnations. How many incarnations do we have? Millions or whatever. But we're programmed somehow to be safe and secure. And then you have the powers of like you mentioned, the leader of our country in the United States, and friends, stimulating people to interfere and into kind of like using that need for survival to get and manipulate the whole system, so for their own purposes, whatever those are. And
Yes.
yeah, and I, I just recently, my daughter took me on a trip with my granddaughter, and I found there were so many people that I ran into in airport lines, in waiting, lines, just sitting around waiting for our turn for this, that, and the other, shopping in a market even. And most people that I ran into are really men and women of goodwill. And I have such deep hope that the whole planet is being, all of this stuff that's come up for viewing is now available to see. Who knew that all these people were under rocks? Because I would have 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I would have said our country was way on track. And I've been ascendingly shocked at what's appeared in our country, again the United States. And but I just think men and women of goodwill are all over the planet. These lights are all over the planet, and that each one of us And each of our groups, as we come together in meditation and with the concept of lifting humanity, that light really supports the men and women all around the planet to have a clarity that comes up out of the glamour that's being I think, conscientiously stimulated, the glamour and all. And I think that it's really important for each one of us who is an esotericist and a clear thinker of whatever genre that we are, whatever label you want to put on us, that around the planet we make a difference as an individual. Our energy makes a difference, and as group, it makes a difference. I really have hope and trust that the
Excellent.
yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing, and I'm in complete agreement that it's the new group of world servers in mass that may have a powerful effect for transformation. It's not just the masters in the ethers or even those who have undergone different initiations. It's the people of goodwill that are in mass. I mean, look at the congregation of people who are upset with our government and what it's doing, where there have been, for the first time in history, 12 to 15 million people protesting at the same time. I think that's a very optimistic sign. Okay, excellent. Now, this quote we've used many times, and so I'm just going to skip through it very quickly, and that is DK saying that towards the end of the century and during the first few decades of the 21st century, teachings about Shambhala will be given forth. Okay, and this is a quote we've used quite a few times, so we're going to skip through it very quickly. What are some of these newer truths for which I am responsible as transmitting agent to the world of occult students? Let me briefly state them. The teachings on Shambhala, number 1. Information as to the nature of the will. Indications as to the underlying purpose of Sunat Kumara. Directions as to building of the Antakarana, which is the first step towards achieving monadic consciousness, and thus the first step towards the way of the higher evolutions. So we're picking up now sort of where we left off in our last presentation, a deeper study of the idea behind Shambhala and its effect on planetary life, on emerging spiritual groups, and on individual people. Some students think that this Shambhalic force is so austere and abstract, it is well high impossible to allude to or to even describe. It's just pure abstraction. And yes, that may be true in the very highest recesses of Shambhala and the first ray, but we have to always keep in mind that every ray has 7 subplanes, and it's in those subplanes that the approach to Shambhala will first take place. You don't just drop into it all full force, or you'd just be like a leaf blowing in the wind. You integrate over a period of time. And another thing that this quote that we're looking at here, the all-seeing eye of Shambhala, is a world of pure energy, of light and directed force. It can be seen as streams and centers of force, all forming a pattern of consummate beauty. Now, granted, that is an incredible statement, and any art or graph or tabulation is going to fall way short. But the second ray types, they build through visualization. So these images that we're presenting here do have value if taken into the higher mental plane. And yes, you can get a lot of impression just by looking at it, maybe intuitively or on an instinctual level. So we should note here on this image the subtle formation of triangles that permeate through this tabulation, the all-seeing eye. And if you're on a cell phone, it may be difficult to see, but it's one amorphous spherical life impressed from the monad, which deals with the will of the Father, and the logoic plane, and yet all these 7 rays, starting with the red at the very top, which is the first ray, and then the second ray blue, and down through all the 7 rays, it's like a giant eye. And here's another image, only sort of like seen from the top. And I will not claim that these are the correct notes of the different rays or sounds, but they have a strong influence of not just the Bailey material, but H.P. Blavatsky and her secret teachings to her disciples privately before they were published some years ago. So here again, a little more exaggerated. You see the 7 rays. Starts with a red in the middle, blue, green, yellow, orange, 5th ray, 6th ray rose, 7th ray violet. It's a very, very powerful symbol because it shows the autonomy of one spherical life, but within that there are subplanes and subrays that, although they contribute to the overall life of the greater sphere, they have a different contribution to make. And in the next video that I would like the group to use as a meditation, we will see a composite of the 7 rays and their triangles in motion. Also, there's an animation of sort of the cosmic Christ who wields all of the 7 rays with particular emphasis on the 2nd ray, love, wisdom, and 1st ray, power. So it sort of deals with several themes in the same meditation. So take a deep breath, relax, and just breathe in to the animation and let everything just fade into the background.
Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva tatsavitu vareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva tatsavitu vareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva Tatsaviturvarenyam Bargo devasya dhimai Dhiyo yona prachodayat Om Bhurvasvaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bargo devasya dhimai Dhiyo yona prachodayat Svaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bargo devasya dhimai Dhiyo yona prachodayat Om Bhurvasvaha Svaha Tatsaviturvarenyam Bargo devasya dhimai
Excellent. The music was done by Deva Premal as she sang the great mantra, the great Gayatra, which is very magnetic and very powerful. Okay, here we see another tabulation or chart expressing not just the 7 rays to the left, but also the 7 planes to the right. And they have polarities. Generically speaking, all the 7 rays are positive, all the 7 rays are negative or receptive. However, the 7 rays, when you look at ray 1, it's positive, ray 2 is receptive, ray 3 is positive, ray 4 is receptive, and then alternately over on the 7 planes. So when you break it down into the 7 subplanes, you can see how the rays and the planes communicate with each other. And in the very center, where you have the diagonal, where you have the line descending that separates the rays from the planes, the vertical line, you'll see these little round orbs. Well, those 7 are the 7 aspects of the will. In other words, esoterically, it's like an accordion. You could compress that and have only one little orb or one little circle. But for purposes of manifestation, they are separated and expanded. And we have to always keep in mind that the will, even though it ultimately abstracts everything into itself, into pure identification, in the earlier stages, the will comes right down onto the 7th ray, the 7th plane, to keep the program, the scaffolding steady as we all approach the path of return. This is the path of descent. It came down through Manvantari, and now the great outbreath, and now deity, the solar logos, is breathing back in and drawing everything back up into its center of identification and unconditional love. Okay. Now, a number of students have pointed out that we inhabit a second ray solar system, so it's much more important that we should be putting our emphasis on love wisdom, and this is largely true. However, if you're approaching or undergoing the 3rd initiation, you start pulling down energy that emanates from outside our solar system altogether. So keep that in mind, because this is a deep insight why, even though we're all searching for unconditional love, and we know that we need to build more of that in, Aligning with the will is a part of that. Okay, in the next animation, we are going to see a composite of triangles similar to what you see here, which are in motion, and they're more like the DNA molecules of humanity, but they have a parallel in the fusion of the rays and the planes as they wind themselves irresistibly around each other and build the hidden scaffolding of deity. So what we see inside of us on a DNA level is actually there's a cosmic osmosis or DNA that's taking place, and through the power of analogy, through the law of correspondence, they are connected. So we're going to see the individual microcosmic triangles, and then we're going to move into the macrocosmic, the spiritual triangles of God's DNA, where many rivers of fire and light weave the tapestry of God's innermost being. So again, use this as a meditation. Take a deep breath, center yourself, and allow your intuition to take over. This takes a few seconds to boot up. Excellent. Looking at the DNA double helix, you can see, if you're looking carefully and have a large formatted screen, that all of the sacred geometry that we have explored through many, many years of group work together are visible. The dodecahedron, the octahedron, the tetrahedron, all of the platonic solids can be found, all the building blocks of life on all levels can be found in our DNA. DNA that has two long strands or bases that wind around each other like the rays in the planes into a spiral shape. And yet, as we move through this visualization, this video, you can see the symbology of we are simply a series of triangles flashing forth in the infinity of space. And whenever a ray passes over, whenever a plane, the third aspect of deity, passes over a ray, the second aspect of deity, initiation occurs and light flashes forth. So when you study triangles, you realize that they really veil some very sophisticated types of motion and animation that's hard to discern through the lower mind. And then the latter part, it's like these organic rivers of light that solidify into triangles, and then they turn into this sort of like a quantum soup where they're like liquidy. And that's a very important observation, because everything we pin with our lower mind has inherent limitations, and it creates a great base, but animations, visualizations can take the student closer to the thing in itself. Even though these veil the truth, words are twice removed as symbols are only once removed. And then to show the importance of symbols, HPB said there's 7 levels of interpretation, and we will interpret symbols according to where we are on the path of evolution. And that symbol in time will give way to a more potent and powerful and more synthetic symbol. Very organic, very organic. And this is what makes it so beautiful, because it allows you to see how everything is connected. Okay, triangles and the use of the will. The idea of the application of directed motion can be more fully appreciated when we realize that all work with triangles requires the use of the will, intelligently applied and magnetically coordinated. That's a very, very key statement. The idea that everything that we're doing is trying to coordinate magnetic energies, magnetic states of consciousness, and we need to know their polarity. We need to know how they can be flipped. If they're of the wrong magnetic, if they're in the wrong magnetic relationship, how do we flip them? And sometime we'll explore magnets, because if you play with magnets and understand what really happens between positive and negative, or 2 positive and 2 negative charges, you can understand the basis of all occult growth and what's going to be taught in the age of Aquarius as we move along. Okay, it is for this reasons that the astrologies of the future will emphasize the relation and the interrelation of triangles. The new astrologer will, as I have hinted before, lay the emphasis upon the science of triangles. And again, remember, the science of triangles is the science of the vortex in its early stages. The rising sign, as it indicates the way of the soul, and the place of the 3 crosses, which we're going to move into here in a few minutes, a few more slides. Okay, here are the triangles working out microcosmically through your individual centers between the first and fifth initiations. When these triangles, and you'll notice they have polarity, like the sacral center has a plus and a minus, the solar plexus has a plus and a minus. First initiation, when you creatively are able to open the throat center, it takes the sacral center and flips it from a positive outgoing potency to a more limited one. And again, it's not about not having sex. It's about now the majority of that sacral energy is in your throat center. And this is why in the early stages, abstinence was required in more of the Piscean teachings we've had coming from the past. Now it's not required that you abstain from sex, but you put it, to quote the Tibetan, put it in its rightful place. If you have love in your heart, what you do on some of these lower levels becomes sacred. Okay, flipping over to the solar plexus in the heart, which with the transference of the positive and negative takes place when you have an abundance of an emotional energy that's pouring out, and that's not a bad thing, but it needs to be uplifted, reorientated, repolarized magnetically by the heart center. So the heart center is in the early stages prior to second initiation is negative, or it's sort of absent of the higher potencies and the higher love. And the solar plexus is in command or in charge. And then at the second initiation, and this takes place over time, they flip. The heart now becomes positive and the solar plexus becomes negative. But again, not negative in meaning bad or undesirable, negative in that it now receives these gifted heart waves coming from the heart, and it transforms the solar plexus. So you're operating on the three higher subplanes rather than the three lower. And that's what the little white horizontal line symbolizes in the solar plexus center, taking the three lower involutionary elementals who inhabit the solar plexus and are subject to fear, uncertainty, doubt, crises, and different things, which have, believe it or not, guided you to where you are now or to where you were recently in the past. But now you don't need that. You don't have to fear a bear is going to jump you when you get out of your car, because there's no bears in the vicinity. It's just past conditioning. So you lift up the solar plexus, your feelings become sublime, and they become always pointed towards the heart of the system, whether it's your individual heart, the heart of the group, the heart of the Christ, the Bodhisattva, the heart of our solar planetary and solar logos. They're all inherently right there in all these triangles. Okay, we've been over this, but repetition is very important as we move into the age of Aquarius, because we get it by continuous exposure. Okay, the purpose of God working out through triangles. It should by now be obvious to you that this science of triangles concerns the beneficence of deity, in that through the intricate combinations of cosmic, systemic, and planetary triangles, the purpose of God is working out. These purposes are motivated by love. It is through these relationships that love expresses itself, brings about the needed changes for that expression, and human consciousness is brought into the required state of inclusiveness. So let's look at some triangles working through the purpose of God. Now, there are many triangles, and we can't possibly cover but just a couple of them. But here's one where we know Polaris refers to the pole star or the star of direction, and it governs Shambhala. But it has two key posts, T2 key outposts or distributors, which is Aries and Leo. Not the only two, but two in this particular statement by DK. And in that statement, he indicates it's the star of reorientation, and he employs his students to open up a funnel of communication. So Polaris, Aries, and Leo, when linked and the energies are circulating properly, a funnel is created, and the consciousness of the individual person goes right up that funnel and participates, doesn't just view, participates in those powerful first ray forces. And we also know that Sirius, the star of sensitivity, is governed by the hierarchy, and Alcyone, the star of individuality, is governed by humanity. Okay, here's another important relationship. Another name for the pointer is Merrick and Doobie, two stars of the Great Bear. And the Great Bear is also a prototype for the first ray, just as, is a prototype of the first ray. So DK calls this a momentous relationship. The Great Bear pouring down its potency, and it has a relationship to Aries and Leo, as we pointed out before, but then step down further, it has a relationship to Vulcan, Pluto, and the Earth. Okay, now here are the seven stars of the Great Bear, and the pointer that we were just referring to, as DK pointed out, is Merrick and Dubé. And in the coming cycle, which we're just beginning to enter, these different star systems will gain greater prominence. The name of these seven stars are probably Persian or Asian, and when pronounced on the right note or key, they become a powerful mantra to approach these different qualities. Because the DK, the Tibetan, has pointed out that the seven stars of the Great Bear express the seven aspects of the will. And again, Merrick and Dubé relate to the pointer, just as we saw earlier. Okay. Now we're going to move into something incredibly fascinating, and I hope there's some astrologers here that can add to this, because it's a fascinating area of research that has not been well represented in astrology. And the Morya school teaches about the three astrological decadents as outlined by DK. So the Morya school is working on these new streams that are pouring into the planet from Shambhala, hierarchy, and the active intelligent aspect. Okay, the decadents reflect the three aspects of spirit, soul, or personality, and tie into the rays, the different crosses, and the different initiatory crises we all go through. AAB prioritizes soul purpose and initiation over personality prediction, and is a key characteristic of the new and advanced teachings on esoteric astrology. Taking Aries as an example on the mutable or common cross, we see the influence of the three decadents, Mars, the Sun, and Jupiter in the next slide. Later on, on the reverse wheel, these influences will change or become modified. Okay, I hope this is visible because it's sort of a lot of minutia here. But if you look at Aries at the very top, you'll notice it's differentiated into the three decadents, March 21st to April 20th, decadent 1. And according to DK, as we just read, the first decadent relates to the will aspect of deity. The second decadent, April 1st through the 10th of Aries, the color orange relates to the second decadent of Aries. The third decadent between April 11th and 20th, that decadent with its unique ray coloring is the color rich blue. So in other words, what I've done here is I've taken the key color of Aries, which is red, and added, dividing it into three equal parts, added what that bright red or carmine in the upper right of Aries would look with a little bit of orange. Now it looks like it's the same color as the one above it, but it actually is different, has more orange if you see it on my Photoshop. Okay, and then, but what does that decadent look like as far as the color of energy pouring through? When you add a rich blue, now it becomes more like a blue, violet, purple. And so if you go down through all 12 of the astrological influences, you'll see first decadent is influenced more by the will or Shambhala, the second decadent, the love wisdom, the third decadent, active intelligence. So these are all going to be posted for you to explore sometime at your leisure. And this is one of the contributions I'm attempting to make, is to provide more information than anyone could absorb in one sitting. But if some part of this piques your curiosity, you can go back and at Makara, you can pull it up and you can explore it. You can research it and say, wow, this is interesting. Because what I've just described are all the visualizations that you could potentially use. Not just because you're an Aries or Taurus or a Gemini, but what decadent are you in? Because it might be the bright red or carmine with Aries, number 1, but if you're in the third decadent, you might need to change your visualization to something that's more purple blue. Okay, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to show that, in case anybody missed it, just a quick recapitulation here. Aries, now you can see the difference between the bright red first decadent and the second decadent with the orange. It's more easy to discern when you see it like this in Jupiter. Jupiter we know is a second-ray planet. It would bring love wisdom, which is blue. So there you have it. And if you look at the background, you'll see those three same colors. They're not exactly in the correct order, but we have to keep in mind that all cycles overlap. It's not you're in Aries and then at a certain date you move totally into Taurus. there's an overlapping. And these ray energies are very organic. They're not like dinner plates stacked in the cupboard. They have a dominant color and ray influence at the heart of them, like the first decadent, but then they interblend and interweave with the other decadents, and then towards the end of the last decadent, the next astrological sign is pouring in. So I'm not in any way trying to violate the integrity of the Tibetans' teachings here, but to show that there are many things happening organically in the movement of all these spiritual rays and planes, principles and laws. And this is, again, and I apologize for the repetition, to help the student develop more of the intuition, because 90% of all the questions, if not more, that you have about your development and what the next step is and where you're going or how you should relate to other people or your group is inherently contained within that intuitive perception. Sometimes you can spend lifetimes spinning in circles. Yes, the lower mind creates a beautiful foundation, but you have to build on it, and you have to project yourself into the intuition. Okay. So let's look at the 12 astrological signs and the Shambhala. The M is the mutable cross, which relates more to the personality, and the fixed cross relates more to the soul. And these are all oversimplifications of some very abstruse principles and laws and theories that the Tibetan outlines. But I assume everybody has already got some background in this, or if they don't, they can just glean, once again, intuitively what it is that I'm saying. But you see all these threads? These are the subplanes, and it's not drawn to scale. Like, let's take Aries. It has 2 dominant rays. Let's take Capricorn, has 3 dominant rays. And Sagittarius, 3 dominant rays. Well, those rays have sub-rays. And so it's more like a tapestry, to go back to Michael Robbins' genius, when he called his books The Tapestry of the Gods. And I worked with him for 30 years, and a lot of my work was to make visual what he was saying on the mental plane. And he was a genius, and I don't fully understand everything that he did because I'd have to be on the same level, but I understood enough and had enough skill as an artist to try to ground it out and make it more visual. And I did that for 30 years. And then after 30 years, I said, okay, now I got to make these charts, tabulations, and symbols more organic, more fluid, more alive. Okay, and I'll let you all be the evaluators or the judge of whether I have done that. Because these are not something I would normally dream up because I'm of a certain initiatory status. These are almost directly from the Tibetans' teachings, 95% of what I say. And the other 5% is just sort of trying to bridge and to step it down so you can assimilate it in a shorter period of time. Speed is very important here. Okay, so let's just take one of these crosses. The mutable, fixed, and cardinal crosses that are activated on different stages of your development and are worthy of research and study all on their own. But what I've done is I've taken the mutable cross, which is something that we have perhaps largely mastered, and maybe working towards these higher crosses. It's not for me to say, but I want you to see what the mutable cross looks like animated and in motion electrically. And I have used this animation in other contexts, and it's very powerful. Let me just bring it up for a second here, because this is actually something I took from a book on physics, and I'd love to give them credit, but whoever did this originally is lost. I have superimposed over it some occult additives, but what you have is the 4 astrological signs that make up the mutable cross. Now, when you see this and you see these energies moving, keep in mind the 2 little eyes, the little black dots in each one of those 4 signs. That indicates that every astrological sign has a polar opposite it is attempting to fuse with. And any of you who are astrologers will know and understand DK's statement that there are only really 6 astrological signs, but they're separated for purposes of research, study, and understanding. But as you evolve down the path, the polar opposites fuse, just like the rays and the planes fuse. And also in magnetism, in the study of electricity, every magnet, even though it can be polarized positively or negatively, it has inherently within it its polar opposite. It has the potential for a negative charge, which is to me quite astounding, because it shows that all the forces and energies we work with, even in simple magnets, the opportunity for synthesis is always there. You're not just aligning with some totally new energy when you go through initiation. No, you're aligning with that potential that's always been within you. And you can see how, no doubt inadequately, through language, I'm trying to describe a process. So I am not going to say anymore. I'm going to click on the video and use it as a meditation. Imagine yourself in the center, and that all of these 4 energies of the cross, or 8 if you want to look at the polarity of all 4 of these astrological signs and their polar opposite, whatever works for you, but put yourself in the center of that cross and feel those energies moving through you and purifying you, lifting you, not just into the mutable cross, but up and out of the mutable cross towards the fixed cross. Okay, take a deep breath, relax. This is what happens. This is what's happening in a magnet or an electrical charge. We can pick a magnet up, but not realize that there are electrons and charges and countercharges, both positive and negative, working through that. This is what you look like to the masters or to advanced disciples who've developed causal clairvoyance and causal clairaudience, distinctly different than the lower psychism that tries to pass for spiritual development. But you're all very, very familiar with that. You know, this idea of entering the stream in Buddhism, I find very potent when I look at that, because the stream is in constant motion, and it's like you're stepping in and onto something that is in constant movement. It can be developing the new and creative, or it can be shedding the old and unwanted. And again, I apologize for the repetition, but DK has pointed out that the most important principle that the modern disciple can recognize is that all is energy, and that these energies are in motion. Okay, I'm going to stop here for a few minutes, and we're going to take a few questions or shares. How are these videos? You know, almost everything I outline is just preparatory to the videos, to the symbols, to the tabulations. So I would love to hear some feedback at this point. Take a few shares if you're so inclined. If not, we'll just continue.
Miri says, amazing colors and intuitive work. Thank you for sharing and enlightening our perceptions.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
And Jessica said, beautiful ray decadent chart. Looking forward to studying it.
Yes. And Jessica, you and Walter know more about astrology than I do, but I just happen to be the one who does some of the artistic rendering. So we're all learning here. Thank you, Jessica. Okay, any additional comments before we move along? Okay, this indicates we're gone through one major section. The power to visualize. The pictures presented here, coming up in what I've already shared, is a humble and limited attempt to visualize this great sound, the first ray word of power of Shambhala, as it might be seen or heard on the inner planes vibrating. The images may help to stimulate the creative imagination of the occult student, who will then pursue this highly arcane process or science of invocation under more internal and subjective conditions. If students have some visual image upon which to focus, they can more easily transfer this highly arcane and esoteric science up onto the higher subplanes of the mental, where real white magic takes place. But often we have to expose ourselves or explore simple symbols until the veils drop. Okay, so here's a couple that I've done before we get back into some videos. All cosmic electricity, all shambolic energy comes from pure identification, as Michael Robbins would say, and the cosmic electricity is called Fohat, or what HPB calls the fiery whirlwind. You know, many people think that's like just it's just a vague metaphor. But a whirlwind or a vortex, as we've explored and studied over these years working together, is an actual thing. Yeah, it's transparent, it's translucent, it's a state of consciousness, but it is, when seen by these higher masters of wisdom, vortices and whirlwinds or channels. Okay. Note that the vortical design you are looking at indicates an opening or widening of the ethers to let the potency of the first ray descend from its great heights to the lower material levels. The vortex is a sheath through which electricity travels. And the next image really shows that dynamically. Actually, not this one, the one after it. Okay, this is what I call the dance. Faux hot, you're seeing the same vortex we just explored in the last image, now from like above down. And as it penetrates the lower ethers, it causes the second ray to not only come into existence, but also to cause rotation. And in cosmic fire, and we've studied this a little bit, there's 3 types of motion: rotary, cyclic spiral, and progressive motion. And it's all caused by Shambhala, by Fohat. So what you have is you have the rotation. To go back to our polarity, the Wilev deity, Shambhala, is rotating one way, and then when the second ray is either impacted or brought into manifestation, because it's a receptive ray, whereas Shambhala is a positive ray, it is forced out of necessity to curl in the other direction. And then the third ray in turn spins in the other direction, and then on through all the 7 rays. Shambhala, activating or bringing into existence the second ray. Okay, now this is really good. It shows the tube coming from these star systems. It can be the Great Bear, as we explored earlier, or other rays. It can be Polaris. A mantram, when rightly sounded forth, creates a vacuum in matter, resembling a funnel. This funnel formed between the one who sounds it forth and the one who is reached by the sound. One, it links him and aligns him with his higher self or ego. It puts him in contact with his master. It links him with his egoic group and binds all into one composite whole, vibrating to one note. This is very, very esoteric stuff. And I appreciate the patience and the fortitude of this group, because a lot of this stuff relates to what takes place at the 3rd initiation. And again, I can't say that as a fact, because we never assert where things are at, either with our own development or the development of others, because it can lead to glamour. But at the same time, those who have done the work will know the legitimacy of what I'm putting out. It vibrates to one note. That's why you have to know what your notes are, your colors of your rays and your notes, because you build just like the Logos does with that knowledge. But look at the sheaths. It's coming down a long tube, a long vortex, and see the rings pass not. We are all confined to certain rings. These rings are the subplanes and the subrays of that shambolic force, and they can only manifest depending on the preparatory work that you have done. But as it descends and becomes more fiery, more explosive is a key word, all those rings pass not widen. And those rings pass not are like the electrical magnetic mutable cross that I just shared with you. You have to learn the polarity of those rays that you want to bring into your life, and then how to manipulate and build bridges to bring that which is not fully understood into your auric field. Okay, excellent. Okay, you know what? I'm going to stop here so we can have some reflection. But talking about the enunciated sound, as a general rule, the Tibetan says the word relates to the sound of the solar angel. The sound enunciated relates to the monad on its own plane. However, in generic circumstances and in certain contexts, he uses the enunciated word is also shambolic linked. Just so that if you see what appears as some inconsistency, that's where it lies. The vortex design, and I'm going to show it to you in a second, makes up the main body of the trumpet design that I just shared, but I did not share it yet. So this is sort of out of order. The vortex or the trumpet creates the confining walls through which Fohat or the enunciated sound can travel from higher levels to the lower with the least expenditure of energy and with the least resistance. The main body of this trumpet design can be seen to be the color red, symbolized by the first aspect of deity. From out of its flanged throat, the thread of pure Fohatic fire blasts forth. All of the 7 rays and the potential and their potentiality or embryonic state can be seen in the rainbow ring around its inner throat. Okay, let's just bring that up. I should have shared this first and then read what I just did to you. But here is a symbol of the first ray with that dominant red horizontal line or appendage towards the left of the vortex. And then you have a widening of the vortex throat, and out of it blast Shambhala in its most potent form. But embryonically, all the 7 rays always exist in every ray. And that's why there's a solar rainbow around Fohat or cosmic electricity or Shambhala built into it. And again, very inadequate. But I love this quote. The old and outworn presentations were the product of the concrete mind, and they are therefore crystallizing in their effects and distorting in their results. The new approach which I seek to indicate makes its appeal to the abstract mind and to the soul, whose values are sound, and eventually to the intuition. So let me end this presentation with some really important stuff. And you can see I'm halfway through, but that's all right. When you go back at Makara, you'll find all of it right there. Okay, this is what I want to end with. These triangles must be regarded as in rapid movement. I wonder if you can grasp, at least partially and symbolically, the fact that these triangles must not be thought of as placed static and eternally the same, or even as 3-dimensional. They must be regarded as in rapid movement, revolving eternally in space and ceaselessly moving onward, and as of 4th and 5th dimensional extensions. There is no way of depicting them or of bringing them visually to your attention, for only the inner eye or vision can imagine their progression position, or appearance. Therefore, the entire cosmic web and solar system is an intricate, constantly moving, interwoven series of triangles wherein each point of a triangle emanates 3 lines or streams of energy, 9 in all. It is likewise responsive to and receptive of the energies, likewise triple in nature, which lie within its periphery or sphere of influence and vibratory activity. So here's a case where the Tibetan is absolutely correct. There's no way to depict them. However, this is 75 years later, and with the advent of computer graphics and modern techniques, we can at least take his statements and make them visual. So again, these are all symbols, and symbols veil, but what you're going to see and use as a meditation, taking a deep breath, really shows the complexity of symbols and the different levels of them all operating at the same time. So relax, take a deep breath. Excellent. And one last video to conclude our session. And visualize yourself as the solar man or woman, and that all the triangles that you have activated are now pouring through you, agitating all your centers to go combustible, and you become fire, pure solar fire, and prepare later on for the crucifixion, which is not a dying nor giving up, but a shedding of that which is no longer needed and burning in the radiance of your own soul in monadic life.
Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva Tatsaviturvareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya Bhuvasva Tatsaviturvareniyam Bargo devasya limai Yona prachodaya.
Excellent. Any last comments before we close? Thank you very much. for participating in this and adding your quota of thought, inner spiritual love, and developing will, because the group is a synthesis of all of your yearnings, all of your ideals, all of your accomplishments here for all of us to telepathically and intuitively participate in. So thank you and God bless.